There we go. Did it tell you it's recording? Yeah, okay. Okay. Sorry.
And then the forward is just these?
Yeah, just those
Okay.
arrows. All right, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for having me out today. I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully I can give you guys some information. I assume that all of you are pre-med or pre-health or something like that. And the same, I'm sure, for several people who are online on Zoom as well. How many of you are going into medicine? So all of you are pre-med for sure. So not other things, just pre-med. Yourself too? Pre-med, okay. Okay, that's okay. That's all good. Silva, my wife, convinced me to come and talk just because when you're at the position you're in, it's hard to see 2, 3, 5, 10 steps ahead of, how does this all work? Now, I'm not saying that this is going to show you everything, but at least you can see a little bit of how someone who's already 20 years ahead of you is looking backwards and saying, okay, this is some of the thought process, some of the big things to think about as you go along in this process, and then kind of what you can do with this as well, because it seems like all this pre-med and med school thing is like a very much a set destiny, but not necessarily. I mean, and there's always a funny saying, they say, what do you call the person who graduates last in your class in medical school? You still call them doctor. But besides that, the idea is that there are so many different ways you can look at all this. And at least for me, when I first started on this process, I didn't realize that. And only over the many years of getting involved in all kinds of things, do you realize that there's many ways to slice and dice this, whatever suits you and whatever suits what you like. So a little bit about me first, and then we'll kind of jump into all this, because this should not be about me. This is about my experience and how it can help you with your experience. But just the background for me. So I did my undergraduate at UC San Diego a long time ago. And even then, I started off as a bioengineering major. About halfway through my first year, I realized I really didn't like engineering, and then I became a biochemistry major. Also, there were no girls in any of my classes, so it's like, this is not the major for me. Yeah, well, this is the truth. Anyway, I finished from UCSD for my undergrad. I went to Tufts for medical school, and I did my internship at UCLA and my residency at UC Irvine here there was no Gavin Herbert Eye Institute yet, but the precursor to that. And like all of you are Armenian, I assume. Okay. So you know how it also goes too, is some of you want to go into this, some of your parents want you to go into this. It's the doctor, lawyer, engineer kind of thing for some people, and some people are just driven to this kind of thing. When you think about this, and you can start from this, there were some people in my medical school classes who were not science majors. They had to have a science, minor at least. But I remember someone in my class was a French literature major and was in my medical school. There were some people who were English majors or came from the humanities. But obviously, you have to like this, you have to want this, and you have to have at least some experience in the sciences. You don't even know what you're talking about otherwise if you don't have that. What's interesting is this kind of thing can come, I find, for many reasons. Sometimes your family pushes you. Sometimes you've seen family members have certain problems and you want to see if you can help that. Sometimes you have certain problems and you want to have a better insight into that. And sometimes just the connection with patients or the working in the lab is very stimulating. And that's the other thing. The way I put this talk together, it was not that everyone's going to be a doctor. It's like there are multiple ways to slice and dice this. Some people are good with patients. Some people want to work in a lab. Some people want to work on healthcare policy. Some people want to work on whatever, financing for healthcare stuff. It's all good. It just depends. You'll find your place in this world. So again, like I said, healthcare can be a lot of different things. It could be the traditional, your doctor, patient. You could be someone who wants to be a nurse, or you want to be an optometrist or a veterinarian or a tech, or someone who works behind the scenes, like in healthcare administration or healthcare policy. Same thing with academics. Are you the person who likes to work in the lab or at a lab bench? Or are you someone who likes to work with clinical trials or big drug companies, small drug companies? Any of these things, you should not, at this point in time, at this age, you shouldn't say, I'm only going to be a doctor. I'm only going to see a patient. That could be fine. That could be great, but there's lots of different things you could do that you might not even be aware of yet. So some of the big things to think about, some of the really big things are, I mean, again, you have to have a strong interest because this is a long road, whether it's doctor road or optometry road or veterinarian road or whatever. What I've told people over the years is it's almost easier to keep asking yourself, not that I love this, but do I not hate this? You know what I mean? Because there's certain things that you probably have figured out already. Like you're not going to be, a school teacher. You're probably not going to be a whatever, a fitness coach or a whatever it is. You can figure out already. Those things are off my list. And as you get closer and closer to this, and you start going down this healthcare route, what you need to think about is: do you have a strong interest? You have a decent proficiency in sciences. You kind of have to in these things, at least the biological sciences, right? Whether you're an optometrist, a veterinarian, a doctor, you need to have at least some proficiency. And then, the one thing that I find that really splits this for people is, are you a people person or are you not a people person? Because that'll decide a lot. Even if you're a doctor, are you the kind of person who is, a radiologist looking at x-rays and CAT scans and not talking to patients? Or are you the kind of person who, wants to be a psychiatrist and you're only talking to patients, right? But that also goes for other things as well. You can be very much in healthcare and work in a lab. You can be very much in healthcare and invent a new drug, right? And all of those things apply. And then you have to think about timelines, how much endurance you have. Some people don't want to put in, 4 years of college and 4 years of med school and 3 to 7 years of residency, depending what you're doing. Some people are, and there's something for everybody. Some people are fine to be a PA. Some people are fine to be a doctor. Some people are fine to be a nurse. There's something for everybody. And you should think about that. You have to be honest with yourself. You as a doctor, especially a doctor, you won't make any money until you're like 30 years old, which can be fine, but you need to think about that. Do I have the stomach for this? Am I patient enough, perseverant enough that I'm going to go all the way to the other side of this? Because what you don't want to do is go down this journey and 3/4 of the way through go, oh, never mind, I don't like this. And then you wasted a bunch of time. So a lot of like gut checks and a lot of, these things of, do I really like science? Do I really like health? Do I really want to deal with people, or do I really like the behind the scenes kind of stuff? Can I deal with this for 6 years or 8 years or 12 years or whatever the case might be? Whatever, some people have that, some people don't. And you should be very, very honest with yourself now. Okay, because it's a real shame to do all this and see the other side of it is great. To do 3/4 of this or half of this and then change your mind kind of sucks. So my journey a little bit. So I was interested in ophthalmology before I got interested in medicine. And you say, how can that be? So I was born as a preemie, so I had lots and lots of eye problems growing up. So I was around ophthalmologists a lot. I couldn't see anything. I remember I played a whole season of Little League and I never caught the ball or hit the ball. And because they figured out I was super duper nearsighted when I was like 6 years old. I could see great here. And that's about it. So also my mom has a retinal degeneration called retinitis pigmentosa. So we saw how that experience went for her. Also, my dad worked as global head of research and development at Allergan for ophthalmology here in Irvine. So that was the business of ophthalmology. So like the business of ophthalmology, being a patient, my mom's a patient. We talked about ophthalmology a lot around the table. And even my wife, her father also worked at Allergan in ophthalmology. That's how kind of we met. So when we got the whole Armenian thing, you need to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, whatever, pharmacist maybe makes that list too. It was either go to business school or become an ophthalmologist. So the day before I started medical school, I was like, I'm going to be an ophthalmologist or I'm not going to do medicine, because that was like near and dear to my heart. That's not for everybody. Not everybody thinks that way, but usually you have a reason why you want to do this. In fact, ophthalmology is this much of medical school. In fact, what's really interesting is there's so little ophthalmology training in medical school unless you go seek it out, that when you have to deal with the emergency rooms as a doctor, they're very happy to deal with heart attacks, trauma, strokes, and they're scared of the eye stuff because no one knows what to do. So, so anyway, with all of this personal and family background in ophthalmology, and I basically did my undergraduate in biochemistry. I went to Tufts for medical school. I did my residency at UC Irvine. Also, my professional journey, once I finally got out, because of my family's experience and some of the things I was interested in, if you asked me when I was in elementary school or junior high, what did I want to be? I don't know it was a doctor necessarily. It was I wanted to be an inventor, actually. And so what ended up happening is I started practicing as a clinical ophthalmologist, see patients, do surgery, cataracts and whatever. But then I also got interested in drug discovery and development. So my father helped me get into this since he had some background in that as well. And then what I've basically been doing for the last 20 plus years is I've been practicing part-time, and I started 3 biotech companies together with some of them with my father, some without, in parallel, and have more than 80 patents, several drugs that got on the market from what we're working on. Some things work and some things don't, but it's never boring. So the other thing for me that I like about this type of situation is here you see the patients in the clinic, right? You see the patient, what the problem is. Then you get an idea. This is a problem that needs a solution. That there's no good solution for this. And then when you start thinking about the things that you want to focus on, you go back and forth between these two, right? This is where the need is. I can't help Mrs. Jones because she kind of falls between the cracks. We should develop something that helps Mrs. Jones, and then that becomes your impetus for trying to solve a problem. And then you go back and forth on these things. I've had some of my friends do healthcare policy. I've had some of my friends who are physicians go into, investment banking. So you're raising money for new ideas. None of these things, I mean, again, you have to start from somewhere, right? You got to start with, I like medicine. I have the stomach to do this for a long time and I'm going to do it. But when you're done and finished with this, you could do this 10 or 15 different ways. It's not just, I'm in a clinic and I see patients and that's it. So that's certainly what a lot of people do, but there's a lot of ways to do this. So again, got to be seriously interested in this. You got to be really honest with yourself if you're really interested in this. I cannot say this enough, and I tell my own kids this. You cannot expose yourself enough to different things that you may or may not like with this now. Because the one thing from someone who's my age to someone who's your age, you don't have anything to lose right now. Presumably, no one is married, has kids, has a mortgage, has anything. So this is a good time to take all kinds of chances and say, well, that might be interesting, and go try it. You might like it more than you thought. You might hate it. If you hate it, you take it off the list. If you like it, you keep doing more of it. But this is the time when you should do that, because the older you get, the less you will do that, the less you can do that. So this is the time to stick your neck out and say, this sounds interesting. Maybe it'll stick. Be very open-minded and be very passionate. Like, for example, I was so driven to be an ophthalmologist from early on that I kind of burned out. And so what I did is, after I finished med school, I didn't start right away. I took a gap year and I learned how to play golf when I, that year. But I also started at one of my biotech companies. I didn't mean to. It just kind of worked out that way. But so what I'm saying to you is, a year for you guys seems like a long time, but it's not from my perspective. So a year of, I'm going to go and, I'm going to go to Sweden and work at this research institute, because I got lucky and I knew somebody who can get me into that. Try it. Why not? You have nothing to lose. It's not the path to success here, from where you're starting, is in one way to be driven like this and say, I'm going to focus and make sure I do my MCATs and I do well and get on this. On the other hand, it's also to be like this and keep your eyes open to interesting opportunities and say, do I like this or not? Is this for me or not? Or how about maybe this is for me or not? Or maybe this is for me or not? Or that is for me or not? You got to do that. I mean, that's my presentation. So do you guys have any questions for me? Things to think about.
Sorry, you said you took a gap year. You said that was before you started medical school?
No, between medical school and residency, but you could do it then too.
Like undergrad and medical school, I've heard a lot of different things on whether or not that's good or bad or seen as good or bad. I wanted to ask what you know about that.
So here's another thing. At Tufts, again, many moons ago, I was on the admissions committee too. So here's the thing, like if are all of you applying to med school or optometry school, right? Not yet. Okay. So here's an interesting thing. Obviously, you have to be smart. Obviously, you have to have good grades. It's helpful if you have a personality too, right? You'd be surprised. And then the other thing to think about, you back to your question about a gap year and the questions about what the schools look for. So it depends what you do for your gap year. If you're just fooling around, that's not as good. But what you could do is fool around half the time and you can go and do something interesting. It doesn't have to be necessarily exactly related to your, getting into med school necessarily, but something that looks like it's helping you grow, whatever that might mean for you. Volunteering for something. Go volunteer in Armenia for 4 months or 6 months to do something cool. That would be great. It looks good to be satisfying, and it kind of shows that you're growing. What was interesting is when I was on the admissions committee at Tufts, one of the things that would happen is especially for medicine, because this is not like the math department or the physics department where it's just, yes, everyone's nerding out, but sooner or later you're talking to people and helping people. So if you show that you're a well-rounded person, besides the fact that you have good MCATs and good grades, makes a big difference. Or sometimes we would let people in who didn't have the best grades, not have terrible grades, but maybe instead of a A average, might have like an A minus or even a B plus average, but they had very interesting experiences. I remember there was one person who you just couldn't say no to because this person was really cool, had maybe like a B plus average, but then had like a silver medal in track and field in the Olympics. You're like, okay, that tells you what kind of character that person has. If you can work your ass off to do that, then that's kind of a good quality to have for later. Maybe your test scores are a little bit worse, but your character is stronger. To have that kind of perseverance to do that. No one does that. Hardly anybody does that. So you had a question.
Yeah, it kind of is going off your question, but I wanted to see, is there like anything or any activities or extracurriculars that you would recommend during your gap year that might make your application look better?
I would tell you the closer, again, a little bit of self-growth is a good thing also in this, but also the idea of the more you can get into the weeds of what you might end up with. Like, for example, if you want to be an optometrist, go work at the School of Optometry as a volunteer, or go work in an optometrist office for a while, because it'll do two things for you. One, it'll show everybody that you're really committed. And two, it'll show you, can I see myself in this situation 5 years from now, or whatever the case is, right? So it can go both ways.
Sorry, that's one question, actually. So, is there like something that kind of counts more than something else, like in medical school when they're looking at it? Like, is your MCAT score more important than your GPA, which is
Probably. I would say your MCAT score is probably more important. It's been a long time, so it might not be the same, but I would say your MCAT score is probably more important than your GPA. I assume I don't know if this has been a long time, but I remember for every medical school that I got into, I interviewed in person. Do they still do that? Yeah. I mean, listen, it's not the same thing. If you come here, this is such a big school, you can't do that, right? But medical school classes, like Tufts was under 200 people per grade, maybe not even, I don't remember now, but it was pretty small. So what would end up happening is if you're a moron, you can't hold a conversation, that doesn't bode well for you dealing with patients, right? And I can, oh yeah, and then you have all kinds of weird people. Like, so I remember when I lived in Boston, we had, so I was always a really good student, but I had to work really hard. It didn't just come naturally, right? It wasn't just the thing where some people are like savants or just, weird. But I was like the work hard, stay focused, and you did well kind of thing, and had a lot of discipline. But I remember one of my roommates, um, it was two of us and this other roommate, and we would like after maybe living with him for a month or two, we're like, Nick, do you ever study? Ever? No, he'd entertain his girlfriends and screw around or whatever. And then what was really interesting was, so the weekend before like a Monday final or something really big, it counts for half of your grade. This guy had a completely photographic memory to the point where he would sit down, read 1,000 pages that you're making flashcards and notes and doing with the stuff with your friends, and he would order 3 pizzas, put his pajamas on, and just read 1,000 pages while soap opera or something's playing the whole weekend, and just he would ruin the curve for everybody. I mean, he was like probably the second most ranked student in our class, and he didn't put any effort in. But when it came to like going in the hospital wards and seeing patients and being fast on your feet, that's a very different skill set, and that doesn't work necessarily anymore. Right.
I was just gonna say, based off of your story, how could you, because I feel like it's so hard when you're a medical student to compare yourself to others. So how would you kind of, not necessarily compete, but how would you like take someone who like ruins the curve for everyone and kind of like keep up with that momentum?
That's a good question. Well, let me back up a little bit. So I don't know if this is the case anymore. People are nicer to each other in your generation than our generation. People also tend to be nicer to each other on the West Coast in medical schools than on the East Coast for medical schools. In Boston, people would sabotage each other's cadavers and mess things up and take labels off and move them around. Oh, people were real assholes to each other. So that probably has gotten better than it used to be. Also, when I was in medical training, a couple years after I finished my medical training, they actually started becoming concerned that there were no limits on how many hours you could work. So you, without exaggeration, you could work 100, 110 hours in a week, where you basically are getting like a couple hours of sleep, and then you work all day, like not like 9 to 5, like 6 to 10, get in 2 hours of sleep, and then do the same thing again. And then after a while, they outlawed that because people, I mean, you're making these important decisions, and if you don't sleep very much, then really bad things can happen. So they have limits on that. I think, but to answer your question directly, how do you compete with that? Number one, if you got into med school, you're going to be a doctor, right? What's the person who's even last in your class? Doctor. The other thing about medical school is it's interesting because, and again, maybe this has shifted from 20 years ago, but one of the things is some of the types of medicine are super competitive and some are not. I think now isn't the same as when I was there. Neurosurgery was the worst. I think the whole country, one of my friends was telling me this because that's what he went into. When I graduated from medical school, the whole country only had 52 spots for neurosurgeons in the whole country. So there were certain places, certain things that were, want to be a neurosurgeon, that's not going to be very easy. You want to be a internist, that's probably not too hard. You probably get into somewhere really, pretty good. And then and it goes down, like probably what else? Things like orthopedics is always very competitive. Ophthalmology is always very competitive. Some things are competitive because they're very prestigious. Some things are competitive because, like ophthalmology, and that's the other thing. Different specialties of medicine have very specific personalities. You can tell who's going to go into psychiatry your first year. You can tell who's going to go into orthopedics your first year. The jocks are going to go into, for all the jock guys are the ones who are going to be going into orthopedics because they're I don't know, it is what it is. All the kind of oddballs are usually going into psychiatry for their insightful, for anybody who wants to do that.
Not oddball.
Yeah, that's true. We know somebody who's like ophthalmologists tend to be a kind of a little bit of a nerdy bunch. They're like you have to be because you're operating something this big, right? So very detail oriented, a little bit nerdy, not the jocks, not the weirdos necessarily, but you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then also has different lifestyle considerations too. Like, neurosurgeons have have this kind of regard and maybe this kind of pay, but have a terrible lifestyle. A lot of people have to think about, if I want to have kids or I want to be around the family or whatever, you've got to think about that a little bit too. All of this comes into play. Yes.
One of our-
Mhm.
So just so you know,
Yes.
I'm an alumni of the undergrad at UCF, so he's the other end of the spectrum, I'm an undergraduate here, and I'm the president of the alumni chapter, that's how it's going to do and I can see the story. So, I was tapping in one of our alumni who graduated from medical school probably 10 years after you, Mike.
Okay.
And who works with a lot of colleagues.
Yeah.
And I just asked him the MCAT question. He said, yes, they're typically weighted a bit heavier, and plus they use that to sort through the applications. So they need that as, so then I said, because he's like, it's been a while. But
Yeah, not as long as it's been for me. I will also tell you, so, and again, it depends how bad you want it. Like, this is funny. My girlfriend before my wife, when I was in the end of medical school, end of residency and the beginning of medical school, was at UCSD with me. And when I got into medical school on the first try, she took her 3 tries to get into medical school and took the MCAT 3 times. But her situation was more difficult. Like, where my parents were college educated and everyone's very encouraging. She was the first person in the family to go to college. So they were like, why are you doing this? Go get married and have kids. That kind of household. So it was kind of challenging. On the other hand, she's now a dermatologist up in Marin County somewhere. So, what I'm saying to you is, how bad do you want it? Do you know what you're getting yourself into? And, is it all going to be worth it for you or not? I have found medicine to be pretty satisfying. And I find ophthalmology in particular to be very satisfying because, again, for me, I've been on this side of the chair and I've been on the other side of the chair. I've dealt with my mom. I've dealt, all this stuff together. So it makes it easy to kind of put myself in other people's shoes.
just that.
Sure. So yeah, let me talk about that. So, like, for example, one of the projects I'm working on right now, we have a company we started 11 years ago. We developed I'm not a retina specialist, I'm a cataract front of the eye kind of person. We developed a drug for macular degeneration and retinal degenerations, which my mom has one of these retinal degenerations. I mean, for this kooky idea, we said, there's this cancer drug out there that might help for this kind of thing. That's not our molecule. We tried to license it from someone and use it for ophthalmology. They wouldn't let us. We went to people that we knew at Caltech and said, hey, we want to take this and modify it this way, that way, and see if it'll work on this target. And that's what they did. And we paid them to do that. You can't do that when you first start, but after many years of knowing people and knowing what to do, this is what we did. And for example, the drug, so we took a drug, we invented a drug, we, been working with the FDA. We're probably 3/4 of the way through our drug development process. One of the really cool things is my mom has a disease that has no treatment, right? So one of the things that was interesting about this product, and one of the reasons we looked for a product like this, is because of my mom. And then we got a compassionate use exemption for my mom from the FDA, meaning you could treat somebody when you think the drug is pretty safe, even though it's not approved, you can't charge for it. It's my mom. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the point being is, after several years of treating my mom with this medication that we invented, it was very interesting for my mom. She said, for 10 years, my vision's been so bad, I can't see my face. I haven't seen my face in the mirror for a decade. So as we started treating her more and more, she's like, I want you to try an experiment. You have a big mirror in your bathroom every day with all the lighting being the same at nighttime, so there's no outdoor lights. I want you to check yourself, one eye at a time, as we're treating you more and more and more and more. And over the course of a year, she's like, first I could start seeing my earlobe. And then the edge of my eyebrow came back in. And then the edge of this eyebrow, and little by little, like a mosaic, it all filled back. It's not perfect. But she went from, I can't see my hand in front of my face, to now she can see well enough that she can light her own cigarette. I'm so happy. I'm like, yay. But you get so what I'm saying to you is, it's that kind of, it's really funny. I'm like, aren't you proud of your doctor's son who got you smoking again? You can light your own cigarette. I'm like, yay. But to give you an idea how, she said, it's so interesting. I could actually see what my grandkids look like. or I can see what, and I can pick up, remember she said recently, I could pick up like she likes to cook a lot of, most Armenian moms do. She's like, I can pick up a can of something. Can't read the small stuff, but I can see what it is. I can read the big print on it. So it's what I'm saying to you is you can make medicine or all this health science stuff, whatever you want it to be. I know right now it's just get good grades, take the MCAT. But what I'm saying to you is, as you look forward and say, where could this end up? Be very, very open-minded. There's many, many, many ways you can do this that are all very satisfying. That was very personally satisfying for me because it's like, okay, I told my mom, I said, for having a really lousy disease, you're lucky your husband and your son are both in this business, right? And that's how she's gotten to be, much better. One of the other family friends we treated said, I've never seen what my grandchild looks like. And so when we treated her with the same kind of condition, she was like, wow, I can actually see what my grandchildren look like. So it's kind of, especially for vision. I mean, no disrespect to other medical specialties, but short of maybe making people live longer, getting people to see is pretty high on the list. And you fix people's cholesterol stuff, it's good for them, but it doesn't have at least the same personal impact. So, yeah.
Question about, I know you said when you got like experience on yourself, but were there other, like, in medical school, I know there's like rounding in your last 2 years, were there other specialties you ever got interested to or considered?
Good question. I probably, one of the only other ones I really liked was cardiology, was interesting too. So, I like doing things with my hands. So having some, having to do like general surgery where it's only that all the time wasn't so much for me. Doing more like procedures that are more delicate or detailed was more my thing. So like some of the cardiology stuff where you put stents in and things like that are kind of cool. But yeah, like cutting someone open from here to here and fishing around is not that much fun. To each their own, right? Yeah.
Ask about your training specifically. So what did that look like? I guess you graduated medical school and then you did residency, and then is that it? After residency, you just started.
Yeah, so you could do fellowship if you wanted to as well. I chose not to because I started almost from the beginning from practicing, starting these companies. So I'm like, I could do retina fellowship if I wanted to or something, but I never did. So I went directly into that. Yeah, you could do ophthalmology is already a specialty. You can subspecialize even more. So yeah, you can do things like, yeah, there's all kinds. But to give you like a perspective of how everyone knows each other, just ophthalmology, just Orange County, there's probably 30 ophthalmologists. So it's a pretty small club, right? In all of
It's very cool to have Gavin Herbert Eye Institute there. Gavin Herbert, by the way, was the man who founded Allergan.
Right, and a longtime family friend.
The day our dads were.
Right,
So
because when that company started, you guys might know Allergan because they make Botox.
But before that, it was all about the eyes.
None of you are using Botox yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. But to give you an idea, look at how strange things work, right? Allergan was an ophthalmology company before it was a aesthetics company, right? So look at how weird things are. You probably don't know this about Botox. Botox was invented by an ophthalmologist and it was approved for ophthalmology stuff first. So it paralyzes your muscles, right? So you have wrinkles here, it paralyzes them, wrinkles here, it paralyzes them. No comment. But look at how weird medicine works, right? It's not like other kinds of science. Like math is math, physics is physics. But this is, things don't behave the way you expect. So an ophthalmologist invented the idea that like when adults have, sometimes you get viral infections, sometimes you get strokes and your eyes are crooked, right? So one eye muscle is paralyzed, so they're not tracking together. What they would do is you would inject Botox when it was first approved into the opposite eye muscle. So if this side's paralyzed, this is paralyzed, it straightens out. And it lasts 4 months. Usually that's long enough for it to heal. And because you don't want to do surgery on something and then you have it healed and then it's crooked again. They didn't sell a whole lot of it. And then plastic surgeons were smarter, or the dermatologists were smarter. And they're like, you can use it for this. It turned into a huge product. So, I mean, but that's a good example of how you can start in one place and have certain intentions, and it doesn't necessarily work like that. Medicine is a perfect example of that.
I'm sorry, I had a question.
Yeah, no, please, that's why I'm here.
So, in medical school, do people usually go in knowing exactly what they want to emphasize in? Because I was gonna ask, like,
No,
and that's like okay too, right?
that's expected.
That's expected.
I was the exception, not the, everyone's like, why the hell do you want to be an ophthalmologist, right? You know, how'd you figure that out? I was the exception. Here's what most people will know before you start. I want to be, you can end up knowing what, just like when you went to college, right? You don't necessarily know you're going to be a bio major, a chem major, or whatever, but you probably already know if you're going to be a biology major, you're probably not going to be an English major, right? It's going to be the same thing for medical school. Are you in the I want to be a pediatrician mindset, or are you in the I want to be a neurosurgeon mindset? You'll probably get a rough idea of how crazy committed, how much you want a lifestyle, how much money you hope to make, how much whatever. Roughly, you're in this camp or that camp. Usually it gets into two things that decide this. Lifestyle and, well, three things: lifestyle, if you want to do like surgical procedures or not, and then yeah, those are usually the two biggies. You know, some people don't care about their lifestyle and only just want to just go, you know, crazy, and I want to just be the god in the operating room. Okay. And other people are like, no, no, thanks, I don't want to do that. Right. Other people say, I don't like, you know, could be really good as a clinician making decisions, but some people aren't that great with their hands. That's fine. Don't be a surgeon. Right. And you definitely don't want to be a neurosurgeon, ophthalmologist if if you're just you're doing this all the time, because you're operating on things that you can break really easily. You might be able to be an orthopedics person because it's not so delicate. But what I'm saying to you is those are the big camps that they kind of how this kind of works. Yes. How does this work here?
You could just like ask, I don't know if they can hear, just let Arthur know that he can ask his question.
Oh, here I see.
Oh no, it's just chat.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Can you hear us?
Hi, doctor. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Can you guys all hear him? Yeah, everybody can hear you, so be careful what you say.
Great. I just want to thank you, doctor, for taking time to answer some of our questions. I
My
just wanted
pleasure.
to ask, what do you see the future of ophthalmology like, from your opinion, from your experience, where it's heading? Because obviously, from one end, with our aging population, we're going to have a big demand for ophthalmology,
Yeah.
with age-related macular degeneration, all these different conditions. But then at the other end, you see that every year the compensation for cataract surgery is going down, which is weird. So I just wanted to get just your opinion on what do you think the field of ophthalmology will be like in the future?
Well, that's a good question. Let's talk about what I think the future of medicine will be like first, then we can talk about ophthalmology. So the one big thing that's changed even in the last 20, 25 years that I've seen medicine is that, like when I started, a lot of people would basically, you'd finish medical school and you could go and hang up your shingle and have your own little private office space. You don't see that too much anymore. It's too hard to do that. There's all these medical plans and contracts and and it becomes very difficult to have a solo practice, almost impossible lately. That's number one. Number two is there's a mentality shift that's happened as well. Like one of my cousins that just became a urologist very recently. He's been practicing, 5 years maybe. And even then, I'm seeing that with some of the younger ophthalmologists as well, where it was very entrepreneurial before, where you might have this kind of practice set up and you might own the office building and you might own the surgery center or this or that. And so you're making a little bit of money from here or there or whatever, and you can practice the way you kind of want to. And then what's happening more and more is a bunch of money, like a big investment money, like private equity, has moved into acquiring a bunch of practices, putting them all together. And then what happens for the doctors, but the doctors seem to like this, the younger ones especially, is I have a job. I start at 9 and I finish at 5, and I don't get calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, and someone else can deal with that. So whereas it was more of a free for all before, it's becoming more of a steady, predictable job. Now, in terms of, let's talk about reimbursements and things like that. So, Yeah, so generally speaking, for older patients, Medicare or subparts of Medicare are your largest payers, right? For younger patients under 65, it's like Blue Cross and Kaiser and whatever you got, right? So it is true that little bit by little bit, they keep paying you less and less every year. But then the problem is that every year your expenses, if it's your business, keep going up, right? Your employees want more, your rent is a little bit more, your malpractice insurance is a little bit more, and so on and so on and so on. But I don't know, it still seems to work out okay. I mean, yes, you don't have millionaire doctors like you did 20 years ago, but still you can make a pretty good living. I will say this, if you're doing it for the money, you shouldn't. There's a lot easier ways to make money. Make apps, maybe be an influencer, do something. I mean, this is not, if you do this purely for money, this is not the right profession. It's too much work and too hard to do just for that. You have to do it because you like it and you can make a good living. Did I answer your question, Arthur? I hope.
Yes, thank you, doctor. And just to like build off of that, I just want to get your opinion on how you see the field of ophthalmology like changing, like in terms of the introduction of like AI into some of the imaging modalities. Like, how do you think that's going to affect the clinical practice or like the surgical techniques? And like, what do you think is going to be like the major change in the next 10, 15 years, 20 years?
So
Or do you think it'll
I
stay
actually
pretty
advise
similar?
a AI company now that's in retina. And here's how it can be helpful. Some parts of medicine, especially things that are very imaging heavy, right? Ophthalmology is very imaging heavy. You would imagine oncology is very imaging heavy, right? Where's the tumor in the brain or the breast or the gut or whatever it is, right? And some are not. Like if you're a psychiatrist, you probably have no imaging, right? Or very little. If you're a gynecologist, maybe a little, but not a lot. Whereas oncology is lots and lots of imaging. Cardiology, maybe when you're looking for blockages and things. Where I think AI will come in and where we've seen it in ophthalmology already is just starting is, by the way, you guys will appreciate this. A lot of AI work is coming out of Armenia. I've seen at least 3 or 4 or 5 AI companies where all the scientists are in Armenia. And in fact, one I'm advising right now, there's a team in LA and there's a team in Yerevan. And here's an example of what we would use them for. The medication we are developing, we found that, okay, we treated patients in these phase 2 studies. About half the patients got a huge improvement in vision from our drug, and half the patients didn't. And we looked at everything. We said, okay, is it an age thing? Is it ethnicity thing? Is it we did genetic testing on everybody. Is it genetic thing? No. What was the difference between the half that responded and the half that didn't respond? There was only one thing, and it was how preserved is one little segment of the retina where the drug is reviving the tissue, right? The problem is, back to what Arthur is getting at, when you do a scan in the office, in the doctor's office, to look at the retina, you can't, it's so too subtle. You can't pick that out just eyeballing it, just no pun intended, looking at it really quickly, looking at it and saying, okay, that little layer of the retina looks a little off to me. It's too subtle. What can pick up those subtleties, though, is AI. Whereas you dump it into AI and it says, oh, the easy RPE layer, this thickness of the retina where we found in our drug, that specific layer, if it's a certain minimum thickness, it's still fixable. And if it's past a certain minimal thinning, it's not fixable. So that's not only important in terms of, like, for right now, for a drug that's still not approved by the FDA, when you do your next clinical trial, you want every single patient in the next study to have those characteristics, right? Because you're cherry picking to give your drug the best chance for actually making it better for the patients. So you couldn't do that with AI. In fact, what's interesting is you could do that without AI, but it's very difficult. We did it without AI first, where you literally had people like at Duke University at a reading center where they go and trace the levels and they measure everything. It's on a computer, but it's manually one by one. Very painful, very expensive. You could do that for a clinical trial. You could never do that in clinical practice. Whereas we threw this AI software on the same thing, and what took the reading centers 3 months to do, they did it in 3 days. So that's where that's going to go. It's the same thing's going to happen with you know, like people get mammograms, right? Instead of having somebody sit there and look at everything carefully, what's going to happen is you're going to have the software look at it first and say this looks good or looks bad. If it looks bad, it'll certainly go back to a radiologist again for someone to really say for sure. But you can see where a lot of the heavy lifting, dirty work, where it's very tedious, even for a doctor looking at the same things over and over and over again, you'll have the software screen it out the first time, and then you'll have the expert look at it to be absolutely sure. That's where I think this is going. You're going to have lots of the repetitive, mundane stuff in medicine given to AI. You're going to have a lot of the routine, mundane stuff in lots of businesses go to AI first. This is good and bad, right? It's kind of disruptive, right? In the sense that if you have a job that you don't add a lot of value to things, you don't want to be competing against AI, which this is what keeps happening. This is the same thing happened when computers came out too, right? So that's why AI is such a big deal, because you can take things like jobs that a lot of people, some people just don't want to do, you know, and then, you know, like for example, you see it already a little bit with customer service, right? That's phone calls for customer service. Who wants that job? I mean, somebody wants that job, but that's not a very pleasant job, you know? So you can give it to something like AI first, and then you bump it up if it's really, you know, you can't answer it. And that's how, this is what's going to happen in medicine too, ophthalmology or otherwise. But parts of medicine that are really using lots of imaging are going to go first, in my opinion. So, any other questions? So, I think that's it.
What year are you on?
I'm not third year, I'm next year.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Where did you transfer?
For relatively Canadians in the December.
Nice.
I'm also transferred through your good transfer from GCC.
Oh, cool.
Me too.
I love it. And
I'm third year, yeah.
as well. Okay.
I'm third year.
Okay.
So I transferred from
Yeah,
business.
that's wonderful. So
You're a third year too?
yeah.
So all of you, when do you apply to med school? I can't remember now. Is it senior year or junior?
Yeah, so, I think it's a
Crazy scene.
It's our always, because I know, do you guys know many of the ASA members, like, RT? He's working on his MCATs now, so he graduated last year. But he's working, so I mean, you should really bounce ideas off of people that are just a little bit.
Yeah.
older too, especially.
It's a good idea.
But also just graduated. Right, and so he studied for his MCAT.
What was that girl's name? She also, was it Grace or something? There was, yeah, Alice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did she get into med school?
I think she's, I know she's
Right.
working right now,
Yeah.
and I know she took her MCAT. I think she
Okay.
might be like studying again.
It
or-
seems really smart to just give
Right.
yourself a breather and, like you were saying,
Yeah.
do
Well,
other things relevant.
One thing I'll tell you is, for your age, it seems like, oh my God, it's a catastrophe if I take an extra year to do something. It's not. I mean, when you go back and look at it, it's like nothing, right? It seems like that now. It's like, oh my God, I'm falling behind and this and that. And if you can either find your better footing, clear your mind, or make your application stronger, I wouldn't hesitate to do that. So, yeah. That's the other thing. Even though it's hard at your guys' age, this sounds bad, but even at your guys' age, one thing I will tell you, people will always rather take someone they know or is a known quantity than someone who's not. So what I will tell you is this: I mean, you can't control this that much, but like I said, going to, if you can get, it's better to get letters of recommendation that are, this is the best student I've had in the last 10 years, even though if they're not well known, than someone who's really well known and get a so-so, whatever kind of letter. Do you know what I'm saying? Because what you want is, hopefully the person writing the letter knows the person who's looking at your application. It's kind of funny to say this. I've told this to my kids for college too. Sooner or later, for all the hard work you do, some professor somewhere sitting on a toilet on Sunday morning reading your file. So it's like, you just need to catch someone's attention. and then you need to be very persistent. I'm sure it's not that easy to get into med school. It wasn't before. I'm sure it probably still isn't. Yeah. Oh.
I was just gonna ask, like, are there, it's kind of like maybe to like, I was gonna say, are there any like jobs that you would, or maybe fields that you would recommend for people, like, besides ophthalmology, or like even in med school, like, was there like a specific field that you're like, wow, like, I don't know why people aren't doing this more, it's like pretty interesting, or
I think that you should ask yourself, do you like, several people I know split their time. Like, for example, again, I can only speak to ophthalmology, but you can do this in other parts of medicine too. Some parts of medicine have a lot more innovation going on than other parts of medicine. Like, if you're an oncologist, there's a ton of research in oncology, right? More than almost anything else. If there is ophthalmology is like that, cardiology is like that, orthopedics is like that. If I had to say the part of medicine that is probably the least developed, has the most room for improvement, and you're just barely starting to see things happening, is in neurology and neurosciences. Because 50 years ago, everyone was dying of heart attacks, and not so much anymore. 20 years ago, everyone was dying from cancer, and that still happens, but not as much as before. But if you get Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or ALS, you're screwed, right? Still, just like you were 50 years ago. And you're just barely starting to see things come out for that. So, I would say that probably is the least understood, the most room for improvement. Doesn't mean just working as a neurologist might be the most fun. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But certainly if you like the research side of it, there will be a lot going on there. The AI is the other one. You'll see that a lot. So, yes.
Question on your experience during medical school. So like, do you have any like highs and lows that you remember, or like I go on Reddit a lot to read like some things about medical school, and a lot of the times they were saying, oh, the first 2 years are really rough, it was hell, but then the last 2 years it's great, like everything feels like it's falling into place. I don't know if you had any like similar experience.
I would tell you this. I've told Silva this before. I don't know how it is now, maybe not as rough as before, but being in Boston when I was in Boston was rough in the sense that it's kind of like boot camp. I've heard that's gotten better from like my cousin who he went to UCLA much more recently. He started practicing 5 years ago, but it was like maybe, which is unusual, but I remember maybe 20% of my class didn't graduate, didn't finish, just bailed because it was just too much, right? I will say now, after going through that, you realize what you're made of, how tough you really are. How much sleep do you really need? How do you deal with really catastrophic, all kinds of calamitous things going on around you, or people just shooting your head off. You learn how to deal with stuff, and you see how strong you are. So was it terrible all the time? No, it really wasn't. You make good friends. Again, it's probably like being in the military, right? You guys go through all kinds of crap together, and then you kind of share a common bond. Let's see what else. I would say that and then there was weird things like when I did my internship, which was at the UCLA hospitals at Harbor UCLA and St. Mary's Medical Center mostly, couldn't have had worse timing. When I did my medicine internship, before I started ophthalmology residency, was right smack in the middle of the AIDS epidemic with no medications on the market. So people would be dying. I would pronounce someone dead every single day who was like 30 years old or 25 years old. It's pretty terrible. But it is weird because you get through all this stuff if you have to like this enough to do this. It's not for everybody, right? If you just want to make money, go do something else, but if you like it enough, it's worth it. Number one. Number two is it makes you stronger, right? The whole whatever doesn't kill you only makes you stronger kind of thing. I would tell you that the first 2 years feel like an extension of college. The second 2 years, you're like, okay, this is what I'm here for. This is why I'm actually here. When you get to see patients, when you get to see, work with patients, see patients, help patients, do surgery on patients, whatever. It's pretty interesting. So certainly it's not boring at all, not even a little bit. So any other questions? You guys have been kind of quiet over here. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna ask about like admissions. This might sound like I'm trying to get an idea of how to fabricate like a response during the interview, but I'm not. That's not my point. I'm just trying to understand, like, since you've been on an admissions committee, the whole why medicine or why physician question,
Mhm.
it shouldn't sound so tough, but to me that is tough because I know the response. I like helping people and I like human biology is not unique, and apparently it's not, they don't like hearing that is what I've been hearing, but
You know what a better thing would be? An answer to that question is, I thought I liked helping people. And when here's an example, when I actually volunteered in this and this and this, and it really moved me. It doesn't sound boilerplate. It shouldn't be boilerplate. It should be, I really like it, right? Specific experience is what will, think about this, put yourself in their shoes, right? You have all these people coming, all these people have, it becomes, why should we pick you? We'll pick you because A, you have a personality, B, you can have a conversation, C, you're smart on paper. And the last one is, is this person really here for the right reasons, right? So, yeah. So, yeah, I think the more genuine you are, the better. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people just give you the BS answer, and I wouldn't do that. But also, it's very helpful if you showed that you like optometry. I don't know what you like. What do you think? Where are your leanings? Are you a surgeon or are you not a surgeon?
I can think about pediatrics. I volunteer at a children's hospital.
Right.
I'm supposed to be transferring at CHLA.
Okay.
Los Angeles, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I'm a psych major and I've always been interested in like neuroscience, so I don't know, maybe surgery is in the back of my mind, but I should.
You'll know once you start doing a little bit.
Yeah.
So the point being is this: the best thing that you can do is show that you are a reasonable person who's smart, who's fast on their feet, has a personality, and really wants to be there. And how is the best way to show you want to be there is, like I just said, I actually got my hands dirty and went, instead of going screwing around for the summer, I actually didn't just do something BS on paper. I actually, worked in a clinic, and then talk about it. Because the question becomes, why do you want to do this? I said, I thought I wanted to do this because of this, this, and this. My experience, I remember we had this kind of patient and this happened and whatever, and it really moved me and it makes me want to do it even more. Okay, how do you argue with that? Right? Yeah. Like for me, it was like, I've grown up with all these eye problems, all these things. I know exactly what it feels like on the other side. I've seen it from my mom directly. Directly what the impact is. I've been on this, I want to be on this side. I've already been on the patient side. I want to be on the doctor side. And I already know what it's like to see it firsthand, not to have your vision and what the impact is. So what I'm saying to you is, that's not a bullshit answer. It's, that's the truth in my situation. But what I'm saying to you is, be happy you don't have retinal degeneration in your family. But what I'm saying is, it's not too much to ask when you have, I don't know what the admissions rates are. I remember like at our school, it was like 6% admissions rate or something like this. So the whole point is, you would think, I don't, if you have pretty good MCAT scores, I don't think pretty good and a little bit better is going to make the difference, but showing a lot of determination that this is something I really, really want because I've done this, and this and committed to it, that will make the big difference. And you need to have good MCAT scores, you need to have pretty good grades, but a little bit more and a little bit less isn't going to make the difference. I can tell you on the other hand, like in residency, without naming any names, you remember this, there were some people who were just super smart on paper and were complete morons when they were with a patient, or even worse when they're in surgery. And you don't want to produce doctors like that. And in general, as time has gone on, they've been more and more careful not to do that, right? Because if you're really book smart, go be a professor. Don't touch patients. Don't, because really, if you don't have good judgment, how are you going to help a patient? Or if you have really bad hands, how are you going to operate on a patient? I remember there was someone who was really, really smart. And we're like, how did he get into this residency? Everything he touched surgically in the eye was a disaster over and over and over again. I'm like, ophthalmology, half of it is doing surgery to fix people's eyes. If you have really, really bad hands, you should not be. In fact, what was interesting, and this doesn't maybe seem fair, but it's appropriate, is at least in ophthalmology, there was interviews, it was really weird. This is for residency, not for medical school, where they'd say, here's 2 pieces of cloth and some things, stitch it together while we're talking to you and interviewing you. Just want to see if you can, things like that. It's not, they want to see if you will choke or if you will, it doesn't have to be perfect, but at least that I can talk to you and do something else that's somewhat, presentable at the same time. Or they ask you what your hobbies were for ophthalmologists. If you're good at video games, you're usually good at ophthalmology. If you're good at, building models or playing piano, you're usually pretty good at ophthalmology surgery, not necessarily clinically. So my point to you is you should ask yourself all these questions. How badly do I want this? How long am I going to be in this for? Do I really, really want this? So most people I know who are doctors who do this for the right reason are usually pretty happy. So it's respectable, it pays well, usually has, decent amount of prestige and decent amount of, you basically have some control over your destiny. So.
Final question. So you find it, just because maybe I know we're past 8.
That's okay, it doesn't matter. It's fine.
How's everybody doing online?
Any questions online?
There's nothing in the chat, I've been checking, but I told them they can raise their hand too.
Okay,
So you found it fulfilling. That's a big one for me too. Like,
Yes.
I don't know if I can go into it if it's not, a profession is not going to be satisfying to me. So you found it.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, he has someone who was his partner for many years that studied engineering.
Oh, yeah.
got a PhD.
So one of my really close friends, my partner in my practice, and my classmate in residency, he's Lebanese. He came here, maybe when he was 16 or something like that, went to JC, then went to school. He went all the way to getting a PhD in electrical engineering, which is really hard to do, right? Probably one of the hardest engineering, and then practiced that for 2 years ago. I don't like this. And then went back to medical school and did all this other stuff. I guess what I'm saying to you is you should be very, very honest with yourself as you're going along. Do I really like this for the right reasons? Because it's a long road. So
He's happy with it.
very, yeah.
What's his specialty?
He's an ophthalmologist. He was my residency classmate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is kind of like an admissions question, or maybe obviously in school to prepare you, but how important is like your major that you're applying with?
I don't think it's that important.
Because you said you had some very interesting background.
Yeah, I don't think let's say, for example, I knew someone who was like art history major, but you obviously have to take OChem and all this other fun stuff. Actually, I liked OChem, but anyway, most people didn't like OChem. But my point, my point being is, I don't think it matters. I think what matters, in fact, sometimes those majors are more interesting, as long as you did really well in your core classes that you needed for medical school. So again, there's a bajillion biology majors or whatever is most popular these days. But if you come into this from French literature, but you did really well in your OChem and physics classes and whatever classes, and you have a good story to tell, when someone's again sitting on the toilet reading your application, you're like, oh wow, I haven't seen a French literature major come through here in a while. You'll get someone's. I'm not kidding. That's literally how this will work.
So it could be kind of used to your advantage sometimes.
It will absolutely. And again, the same thing goes for a gap year. Some people see it as a weakness. If you do something really interesting in that gap year, it's an advantage. Because you've got a bajillion people coming behind you who are just, check the box, check the box, check the box, and suddenly you're not checked the box. Right?
Is anyone here interested in cardiology? I don't know. It's because the person was texting me.
We only love ophthalmology, sorry.
So,
So,
Is it a subspecialty of internal?
it is.
Oh,
yeah, there's a couple of specialties that you can't do directly from medical school. One of them is cardiology. You have to do general medicine and then subspecialize in cardiology. The other one is plastic surgery. Maybe it's changed a little now, but you can't go directly from medical school to plastic surgery. You usually have to go from medical school to either derm and then plastics, or general surgery and then plastics. I don't know. So, you know what is weird about medicine is sometimes you think it's overkill, and sometimes you think it's a good idea, sometimes it's a bad idea. For me to be an ophthalmologist and work on this much of the body, still delivered like 15 babies, and I still worked in a locked psych ward, and I still did it and all these different things. And you ask yourself, isn't that kind of overkill? But the advantage to that is you're not siloed. In other words, you can look at an EKG if you really need to, or you can think about all the different kind of situations. You don't interact with that much anymore, but at least, you've seen everything.
Same with my neighbor that was having headaches.
Yeah, I diagnosed a brain tumor in my neighbor.
And he thought it was,
Yeah, he thought he had glaucoma. He goes, I've been seeing somebody for glaucoma for a long time. I look at his visual fields, where you have blind spots in your vision. And from ophthalmology, but also neurology, like depending on where a blockage or a tumor is, your blind spots have a certain configuration. I remember looking at this, and I'm like, oh crap, this is not glaucoma. You have a brain tumor. The same day he went to go see a neurologist, and sure enough, he's got a brain tumor. They were able to treat it, but yeah, that's true.
and it's very helpful. All kinds of things.
I'm sure.
All kinds of ER visits we have avoided.
Oh, yeah, a lot. That's true.
Or should they call you about everything, not just eye problems?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And all my family's like, can you call a prescription for me? Yes, sure. So it's been a good journey. I don't regret it. So.
I guess if no one has any more questions, we can go ahead and I don't know if anyone online has, I can ask them.
Ask one last
Is
time.
this the first meeting?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I hope you guys find this helpful.
I appreciate it.
Inga, if you want, you're welcome to give my email address to everybody. They can email me if you have any questions. Okay.
Even better, okay, great.
Yeah, she's in,
Okay. Hi, everyone. If you have any last minute questions, feel free to raise your hand right now. That would right now would be the chance, or put it in the chat, or but we will be ending the meeting very soon, because I feel like we got to a lot of people's questions already. I'll wait like a minute or two, and then we'll be ending the meeting. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Did you break it? You broke the toe? Do any of you guys have doctors in your families at all? Would you be the first one?
Thank you, Renia. Thank you for joining.
Really? Trying to get you to be a lawyer?
Yes. I'm pretty dental, I'm not really.
Okay, doesn't matter.
Very quickly, I'm so sorry. Before everyone leaves on Zoom, I just want to say a huge thank you. I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone when I say we have people thanking you in the chat as well. Thank you, Dr. Karageozian. That was a wonderful meeting. I learned a lot. I don't know about you guys. I'm sure you guys did too. That was a lot of great information, and it's a stressful journey going into any healthcare profession. So it's great hearing like someone else's journey. Especially it's great. You're Armenian, we can relate to you in our community. So I don't know, it's very helpful hearing that and like hearing your advice and it's okay to take a gap year and all that, which yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and there's a lot of alumni that are in the medical, every branch,
Mm-hmm.
as well as nursing, as well as pharmacy. And part of our mission is the alumni chapter is to connect people with mentors or whatever.
Yeah.
In a very loose setting, but just someone you can bounce ideas off of, someone you can talk to, and people at different stages of the game. And again, I really urge everybody to tap into your ASA, especially the people that are just graduating,
Mm-hmm.
who are just starting this process, like talk to them. I know
Yeah.
they're busy studying, but they're but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're so nice and they're so helpful and you can bounce ideas.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
can give you one last, so for people who are doing applications and things about applications. If you really want to stick out, these are probably the two most important things I would use to try to set yourself apart. I mean, your grades are gonna be your grades, your MCAT's gonna be your MCAT's, right? But if you wanna do things that you get a high return for a relatively small amount of work. The two things that I would recommend to you for the high impact for your application to stick out a little bit, even for dental school too, is this. Number one is if you can spend the summer or you can spend some time working for a dentist, a doctor that can write you a letter of recommendation. And here's the thing that's important. That letter of recommendation doesn't need to be from someone famous. That letter of recommendation needs to be, this is the best person I've worked with in the last 10 years, that kind of thing. And so, what I would do is you can find someone that you're friendly with or friend of the family or whatever. And even then what I would found is when I would, instead of asking people for a letter of recommendation, it's better to say, would you feel comfortable writing a letter of recommendation for me? And it doesn't matter what they say, it matters how they say it, right? If you get absolutely, I'm very happy to do that, that's the person you say, okay. We get even the tinge of hesitation, you're right, you think about it, and I'll get back to you kind of thing. But you literally want this person can walk on water letter, right? That's what you want. And if it means it's your, you can cheat a little bit around there. Just if it's your dad's Armenian friend and you work your ass off in his clinic for a summer, but you get a letter, you can say, I need a really strong letter, something like this. I would not be embarrassed to ask for that. Say, I need a walk on water letter, or I need a letter that really sticks out. That says do you feel comfortable writing me a really strong letter of recommendation? And you'll know in a second, right? If it's yeah, right, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. That's not what you want, right? And you get yeah, sure, absolutely, I'm very happy to do that for you. That's what you want. Because again, your MCATs are gonna be your MCATs, your grades are gonna be your grades. But something like that will take you from the pile of, I'm not sure what to do with this too. We should look at this some more. Right, because for all the, for all the people who are coming through who just, ace their grades and ace their this and that, there aren't that many people who love that kind of angle. Same thing goes for, it would be very, very smart. That kills two birds with one stone. It shows you, if you can get a letter like that, and you can work in a part of medicine that you really think you like a lot, then that shows that this person's serious enough to go get their hands dirty. They're not off screwing around during the summer. Right? They get their hands dirty, they gotta walk on order letter of recommendation. And then that also becomes back to what you were saying earlier, is when you say, or you were saying earlier, why do you want to do this? You can say, well, I thought I wanted to do this because of blah, 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 blah. And I did this, and this is kind of the experience that I had, and it really drove it home for me. If I could tell you one thing, whether it's you take a gap year, you just do it during the summers, you do it during the school year, work in a part of medicine that seems interesting for you. And if you can do it, I would suggest you will get more bang for your buck if you work for a private doctor and get a letter like that than for a big hospital you don't know anybody. Right? If you have a connection to somebody who, whatever, Armenian community or otherwise, that says this person is really a strong candidate, that's what you need. That'd make a big difference.
That's a good one. I guess that makes sense, like going off of their response, because I don't know, I might be a little hesitant to ask, like, could I get a strong recommendation from you? But if they're okay, yes.
Strong, but her
Do you feel
recommendation.
comfortable? Yeah, that's a good way of wording it. Yeah.
And then what the answer that, again, it's just like you're dating, you can tell in 2 seconds what kind of response you're gonna get, right? So it's like, you know, think about it, right? You can tell the person, think about it if you feel comfortable or not. But if you get a very strong response, then there you go.
Hmm.
And the thing that's interesting is that, all these medical schools all over the place, they might not know who Dr. Karageozian is or whatever, whoever you happen to pick. Or that he's your uncle's friend or something like that. But if you can get that kind of letter and you actually did the work and you can talk about it, that'd go a long way. So those are the kind of soft things that will separate out a bunch of pretty strong applicants. Because if you have none of that stuff and you just look at it on paper, people get a little worried too. Right? Because again, you are not just doing math, exercises, you actually have to take care of people. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
feel free to
for
reach
that.
out. Ingrid has my email address.
Yes, I will actually, I'll put it in the chat I know there's like just a few people left, but I can. Actually, I'll send it to our group me, or I'll email it, if you guys could, I'm not sure if you guys are in our group me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll message it to you guys, or I'll email it to you. It's in the APS Instagram bio, there's a link tree and you can join our group me from there. And then I'll message Dr. Karageozian's email. He said you can contact him if you have questions, which is very kind of you to do that once again. But I think we're gonna complete the meeting for today. Thank you guys so much for sticking around once again. Thank you so much for being here and sharing some of your wisdom of your medical journey. But yeah, I'll end the meeting now, and thanks everyone.